Hello, this is Yvette of Honey Deep, Honey Wide with this week's episode of Minutes to Insight, where I pull one fortune from all of the fortunes that I've written since the last winter solstice, and I reflect on what this message means to me right now. Thank you so much for joining me this week. I am playing around with the lighting. Today, I have the light of the setting sun behind me, so it will shift. So we'll see if it works. Oh, light, it's always changing. Really excited because that greenness back there is it's a part of my living curtain that I've been growing out of beans that I planted earlier in the year. So I think it's looking pretty excellent. All right, let me see what we have this week. Starting to get very dense with many fortunes as we are already into the 8th month. What message do we reflect on right now? Okay. Ooh, this one comes from June 15th to be exact. If you listen with sincerity and devotion, you will hear your spirit calling you to service that lights up your life. If you listen with sincerity and devotion, you will hear your spirit calling you to service that lights up your life. If you listen with sincerity and devotion, you will hear your spirit calling you to service that lights up your life. This is one I've been growing up to. It's funny, I was brought up in a house with Christian values, or I was brought up Christian, and there was always this message of like following God's will for us. And yes, following God's will. And this is something as a young person kind of grated on me because I wasn't really sure that I wanted. It's like, well, what about what I want? So it was, and since I've been a young person, I no longer I was brought up Christian, but I no longer identify as Christian. But a lot of the beliefs and the values that I was brought up with are still values of mine. And a lot of the spiritual quandaries I had as a little girl are ones that have followed me into adulthood. And this would be one of them. And it's funny because even as an adult, even though I no longer identify with that Christian, the Christian beliefs or the Christian faith, for reasons I won't get into right here, there are still a lot of things that I carry from that upbringing that I still reflect upon. And I think following the will of God is a huge one. I mean, granted, if you are agnostic or atheist, this might not be something that you think about much. But for one such as myself, who has who senses the unity of all things, and for me, that has been a powerful guiding force in my life. This greater power that is the source of all seen and unseen creation. What is the will of this source? Does this source have a will? Does this source think about, like, what is our purpose in life? Is there Is there a higher power that knows our purpose in life? Does it already have what our purpose in life is planned out for us? And I think as a child, I found that very difficult, um, because I wanted to be myself. I wanted to know what I really wanted. And as a child, I grew up in my parents' house and I had to follow their rules. And so the idea of growing up to an adult that was going to grow up from following my parents' rules to following God's rules was a very frustrating idea for me. I didn't like it, and I didn't really want any part of it. Um, I didn't really want to argue about it with my mom or other people of the faith, because I figured, oh wow, they're just going to disagree with me and tell me all the ways that I'm wrong, and I don't really care about hearing why they think I'm wrong. This is just the way I felt. I didn't feel like I wanted to follow any more rules. Growing up as a kid, you might remember, it kind of stinks. Oh, what you don't realize as a child, though, is that you're always going to be dealing with rules, even if you don't believe in God. And there's societal rules, there's government rules and regulations, and it's something that we deal with in this third dimension, so we don't ever escape it. But as a child, I very much was not interested in having to continue to follow more rules. I wanted to know what I wanted, and I wanted to live what I wanted. And I was very afraid as a child. I was very afraid that God would want something for me that I didn't want. It's amazing how difficult that can be, when you're taught that it's right to follow God's will, but inside you're scared that God's will is something that you don't want. So what does that have to do with today's message? If you listen with sincerity and devotion, you will hear your spirit calling you to the service that lights up your life. Okay, so what that has to do with this is, since I've grown up, I've ceased to feel that there could be some kind of antagonistic God the Father who's there and says, you must obey, and I don't care if you don't want to do this, you must do it anyway. I think probably what I got that idea from was the Old Testament, because I was a child that loved Bible stories. I read the Bible when I was as a kid. I think I was still in elementary school when I read the Bible. And if you read the Old Testament, there's a lot of messed up stories in the Old Testament. And there's a lot of stories about, the patriarchs having spiritual battles with the angels, or not wanting to follow God's direction, or even the tale of Job, where, God takes everything away from Job to see if Job will still be faithful to him. And to me, that was really messed up. So I think, as a child, reading the Old Testament, and when I would read stories, and especially because you're taught that these stories are all true and historical, and I kind of think they are, and you read these stories and you're like, man, this is kind of harsh. Or how Moses was, not permitted to enter the promised land because he'd broken some kind of rule with God. I mean, the God of the Old Testament was really a hard ass. And so I was just like, whoa, I don't want that. I don't want to be, forced into such difficult, I don't want to be like, what if God pulls a Job on me just to see how faithful I am? I don't really think that's the kind of relationship I want, where I get tested like that. So, you can see the kind of kid I was. I had a lot of spiritual anxiety. So I was a special kind of kid. I don't know how many kids I know I don't know of any kids that have these kinds of, and I don't think I even told my parents much about like how I used to really ruminate on these stories. And I used to think about my relationship with God a lot, even as a child. And here I'm an adult and I still do that. But what I'm coming around to once again is that my relationship with God feels very different than it did as a child reading these Bible stories. And they're still wonderful stories. I think there's a lot to be learned from them. The way I interpret them as a child was not the only way one could interpret them. I think there's ways you could interpret it that would maybe feel a little bit better. But basically, I no longer feel that there is like this very patriarchal God out there that's like, you will do this, you will follow what it is, my plan for you. It's like, no, I don't feel that way anymore. Instead, what I feel is that who I am naturally, my natural, true identity is already in alignment with the source of all creation. It's impossible for who I am to be not in alignment with source. Now, who I express myself to be in my daily interactions with humans and the choices I make and the words I say, they may not be, my words and actions may not always be in alignment. And so that's part of my learning process, is learning how to be in alignment more and more with what is the true core of me, my spirit. And my spirit is my connection to the spirit of all things. So I no longer feel that there's some God out there that's going to be telling me to do something I don't want to do. Granted, I might get a message to do something that I need to do something that I might be afraid to do, or maybe there's something else I'd rather do first, or what have you. But ultimately, if I really sit, if I really listen daily by the hour with sincerity and devotion, if I'm really listening, and then I listen more, and then I listen some more, and I just keep on sinking in with that, I find that my spirit is calling me. And what it's calling me to do is to live a life that is more fulfilling to me than I dreamed was possible. You know, right now, it's funny, I've been following spirit all my life. I really have. And sometimes I've done it very awkwardly. And sometimes I've made a lot of bad choices. And through it all, I've always been listening. And it's like, okay, well, why am I so unhappy? And then I would think about it and I'd write about it, and I'd constantly reach. I'd strive for more and more harmonious way to be. And, you know, it took decades to finally get to a point where I'm like, this is starting to feel good. This is starting to feel like I don't need as much as I thought I needed. Do I still have desires that I have not realized yet? Sure, absolutely. And I'm also realizing I have everything I need, and I continually am provided for and cared for. And when I'm lonely, I continually have, you know, messages that come to me through people, through events, through songs, through whatever's happening to communicate to me how much I am loved. And so this listening with sincerity and devotion, making that listening to the spirit, because your spirit is your portal to the source of all things. If you want to know what the source and all things, like of all things, has for you, you just cue into your spirit and it'll tell you. And you might misinterpret it. You might think, oh wow, I think it means that, because sometimes we overthink these things. Or sometimes, we're having all these different emotions, and it's very difficult to know what it is that your spirit's saying, because there's so much thinking going on, and there's so many conflicting emotions going on. So it can take some skill, and it definitely takes devotion. This is not something where you can listen for a few days, or even, well, when you're really good, I'm sure you can get the message in an instant. And I do get messages in instants, but the whole plan, how is it playing out? That's something you have to listen on a daily basis. This can't be just something that, okay, I listened. It's like, no, you got to listen some more, because our ability to listen is something that needs a lot of work. Like, we're talking about the rest of your life and probably many more lives. It's just, we're not gonna be done listening anytime soon. If we really want to know what our spirit's saying, there's so much that our spirit has for us. And so what I come to with this message is an appreciation for how my heart has changed since I was a young girl. And I love that little girl that I was, that young child, that young woman. I mean, I know there's kids that like are spiritually inclined. I know there's lots of them. But yeah, I don't know how many of them get stuck in these existential questions. I'm like, God bless that little girl. Like, I really took the story of Job to heart. I took the story of Moses and Jacob and Joshua to heart. Like, oh my God. And then on top of it, I'm like, they're all men. That really bothered me too. I'm like, that sent a very strong message out to me. Let me tell you, as a young girl, all of these, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That's a whole nother topic. I won't go on, but like, that's kind of frustrating to, be a young child and look to a book for all these spiritual lessons, and there's hardly any women in them. And whatever women are in them, it's always these extremely minor roles. Okay. So I'll let that there. But anyway, I could see as a child, like, I'm so grateful for how my heart's changed. I'm no longer afraid that there's this paternalistic God out there that's going to be sending me on some journey that I want no part of. I don't have that fear anymore, because I know even if I'm not getting the message completely right today, I know with my devotion, my commitment to listening, that I am getting clues. I've been getting clues all along. I will continue to get clues. I can trust. I can trust my devotion. My spirit can trust me. Was it always this way? No. So let me tell you, if you haven't been talking to your spirit, don't worry about it. You can start listening today. Just start today. Just start this moment. You have an amazing spirit. It wants to tell you so many things. Everything you love, everything that you're drawn to, everything that inspires you, those are all clues. Your spirit is sending you clues, and your spirit is always tapped into the universe. And you don't have to worry about being sent on some mission that is not in alignment with your heart. the call of spirit is always in alignment with your heart. And it's not always easy. It's oftentimes challenging, but it's got your best interest at heart, always and completely. In times like this, it's very important to know that there is something you can trust. And only you can decipher these messages for yourself. Nobody else. Thank you so much. I hope you're finding the service that lights your life up. I know, I know since last year, it's really lit my life up to be sharing these daily fortunes and to be sharing. And since 2017, I got my first smartphone, and I've been just taking amazing pictures, and I felt so inspired to take them and to share them and to continue my journeys in nature. So that's been lighting up my life, and making these videos has been lighting up my life too. I feel very much like this is something, as a child, I started out. I was a sweet, adorable child that had a very secret, hidden life that nobody knew about. And one of the things I would do is I'd sit alone in my room in front of a mirror, and I would talk to myself, and I would just get a thrill out of watching my face change and my expressions. And then I would be like, I'd pretend to sell something, and I would just get such a kick out of it. And doing these videos brings me back in contact with that sweet, adorable, strange, so unique, intelligent, creative, cute, faithful, devoted, deep, dark, wide, beautiful little girl that I once was. Well, thank you so much. If you enjoy these offerings, please share, like, and subscribe. And I look forward to sharing more with you next week. Namaste.